diversity data in general, outside academia, then show some data about diversity in Indian universities, caste and gender diversity data, and then specifically caste and gender diversity data in IITs, which has been gathered using RTI, and then finally discuss basically based on the experience that I have had, and I've had a lot of discussion with various students about what are the problems that lack of diversity in faculty and other things causes, and what can be done to improve that. So that's the context. And today we have speaker Suraj Yengde. Suraj is a scholar at Harvard, and Suraj will be talking us through these slides. Suraj. I will support him in promoting slides regarding the academic.
Thank you, everybody. Let's give it up to Pratap and his wonderful I'm also here as a representative of a group called a campaign we just recently launched, India for Diversity. And I just want to acknowledge some of those invisible people here. Maybe Vinaya Millen was one of the alums of IITB, Anil, Swaroop, and we have some Rahul there. So most of volunteers who have been helping us take through some of the intricate issues that we have not addressed as of yet. My name is Suraj. I am a Du Bois Fellow at Harvard, and also I'm a research associate with the Department of African and African American Studies, also at Harvard. The question of diversity is important to me, and it is important to all of us. It's just that maybe we don't know how it manifests in our life. Sometimes we fail, or sometimes we understand. And since we all are beneficiaries of diversity in one way or another, we tend to sympathize with it. But what is actually diversity? And of course, this session is centered around diversity at IIT. But the presentation is very, But also, if you guys are tweeting, because it's a social media thing, tweeting and Facebooking, just please do tag along. I don't know how the media team is looking into that, but it's at the bottom. So the presentation, of course, goes with we'll run through some of the numbers, statistics, just to know where we are, so that we can kind of zero in and end towards some of the most workable models that we have. Then we'll go through the diversity IITs. Then we'll talk about the representation and lack of representation in bureaucracy, the Indian cabinet, the business. And then, of course, then we have the suggestion and how to improve diversity. And then Pratap has very courageously, as I've said, has drafted this. So let's see the diversity component. We'll talk about diversity component towards that, but also diversity as observed within Indian context. The diverse groups are scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC, persons with disability, Muslims, non-Muslim minorities, and there was a group identified as upper caste, Hindus, and then of course the most essential aspect of diversity is male and female diversity. And we are very particular in the idea of diversity is to elevate the gender parity. We want to actually talk about gender as we talk about various groups, and that's why you will notice when we talk about OBC or Muslims or SCs, we also have a separate column for male and female. And this data is from All India Survey on Higher Education. It's a MHRD's data, and it's a recent one. And so we'll also acknowledge our friend Siddharth has really compiled this. So as we can see here, this data speaks for itself. The population of scheduled caste is 15%. The representation in teaching in education field is 5.39%. Of them, male are 3.81 and female are maybe 2%. STs, miserable situation, 7.5% in India's demographic calculation. They represent mere 1.65. Of them, male are 1% and female are 0.58. Scheduled caste, scheduled tribe women are in Indian academia. OBCs represent 40%. Of them, only 15.3% are sitting around us. Of them, of male are 9.10% and female are half, 5.3. Persons with disabilities, another very important but yet ignored component of Indian diversity. Well, the population we don't know, but the representation we know. 0.28% of them male have 0.21, and again, female goes to 0.08%. And then Muslims represent 16%. They are represented in teaching departments and other affiliated education sector. Only 2.52% male, 1.36, and female again 1.17. And then there was a group which identified itself as upper caste Hindus, and the representation is for them the total is 70.22. Of them male is 46.47, and then female is 23. So what does it say to us? I mean, the figures say for itself that there's clearly a problem, and when we want to direct and channel and vent our problems and our frustrations, one of the issues could be here. When we talk about the idea of lowering standards of Indian schools, colleges, and as compared to, in top 200 institutions, no single Indian institution ranks itself. The last I checked was, I think it was IIT Bombay in this year, I think in top 200 or 250. But I was also surveying the data for the past 5 years. In top 250, no single Indian institute was featured. In the top 250 institutes in the world. And Singapore, for that matter, is in top 20. I mean, Singapore, come on, I don't want to, but population density wise, and Singapore had 2 institutions in top 50. This was the NUS and the other technical institution. And comparably, we tend to pride ourselves as institutes of eminence and excellence, and we have this kind of, having an output, but we don't feature in international standards. And one of the reasons, I think, is perhaps this data. There is not many people in our classrooms, in our teaching positions, and in our colleagues. This is the data we kind of, this is the same data, but it was taken from here.
Very quick question about the previous slide.
Please, yes.
When you look at the disability data, not right away, is there breakout data available about physical disabilities versus mental disabilities and categories of disability and so on?
Unfortunately, we have, it's the data that we got from the state. But what I see is that's a very important point where we can perhaps now do our own surveys, because state is not really doing those, and that is very important, because disabilities of mental, physical, as well as the social disabilities.
So Tambe, that data was not available in this survey.
Yeah, he was
6% of our population has a disability. The number is not unknown, it's known at 6%. There are 27 categories of disability as per the 2011 census. And the way we collected that data was by moving the question on disability from the 14th page to the 2nd page. So people were actually trained to go out and ask that question on disability. And that's how we got our first data sets. The data is available in the 2011 census.
So the question is,
No, this is that.
in the teaching departments, I'm not talking about the general population, how many people have disabilities, but in the teaching departments, how many people with disabilities have jobs?
That breakup in this report was not available.
So another interesting way to potentially look at this would be if you can understand the same class, a different classification, basically using financial data. Like, what if some of those SCs were from well-off families versus who are truly SCs. Similarly with Hindus, who are upper caste Hindus, but at the end of the day, if you're looking at opportunities and in all the different fields, then the financial aspect does control a lot of how resources are available and deployed. So it would be good to see this not as a default classification, but the same information in a different way. As well, would be interesting to analyze.
No, absolutely. Now we will have that data as we go. There's on the slide.
Of course.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I couldn't see the connect between your argument that Indian institutes are not in the top 200 to diversity.
Sure.
I don't completely see
Sure.
that.
Yeah. Once I go through this data, maybe I can come and answer to you. So what happens is once we run through this, but I will answer that. That's the All India University kind of.
So this is basically the 2011, 2012 versus 2015, 2016 pattern. So some of the percentages have gone down. The percentages which have been gone down have been marked by that arrow.
So the situation or the condition, let's say in this case, the scheduled caste has gone down. I mean 5.5 to 5.4. Of course, there is increase, but there is not more than 2% increase from the record of 2011, 12, 2015, 16. And now, of course, there's a data at diversity at IITs. Student strength, of course, of the Bombay is 10,186. It's a data that again is comparable from 2011, 12, and 2015, 16. The general population again represents 6 or 4, scheduled caste were 4, STs represented with 0.57%, STs were absent, OBC is mere 1%. And if we talk about 23 IITs, the situation is not better. It's again 2.41%, the ST is 0.37%, and OBC is 5.48. Now this is compared to the population that is represented in India. And of course, this data that is presented here has also not adequately understood in the sense that what are the experiences, meaning the people with other social disabilities apart from the category that I mentioned, which are constitutional categories. So now, this is relating to, let's say, this was mostly education institutes. We talked about all India university kind of representation, central universities, institutes of national importance, state universities, deemed universities, then we have IITs. Now, diversity in, let's say, in the political position, because at the end of the day, what we usually do is we say, the political leadership is at fault here, They have really been corrupt for themselves, they have not really uplifted their communities. So we always put the ball on someone else's shoulder. But then again, when we talk about, and this is of course from the Mint has compiled, and I just got this on the screen, India's cabinet has always had socially skewed composition, that's what the title, and then of course it goes from 1952, since we had first general elections, up until 2014, the representation in the cabinets, the important positions, the privileges and the positions of power. I mean, if you see, this is very disturbing. Until from 1952 to 1967, there is no ST. And then we can see slowly from 1971, the scheduled tribes, Adivasi, the most marginalized people are then getting, and then they get absent again in 1989, and from then we have 1997. And so, what is this? What is this saying? I mean, the percentage itself speaks that even in the political leadership, the majority are still the people who are also majority in the positions of education. I mean, represented highly in education. And so this composition makes sense in the sense that the political leadership is not adequately represented, and that's why perhaps one of the reasons could be that there is this lack of understanding of these issues. But let's say this is of course politics. How about we have UPSC exams, we have various there is bureaucracy. How are they represented in bureaucracy? This is the data that a question was raised by a member of parliament, Yengde, also Suraj had raised about representation, and the Minister of Personnel had put this on their website. So in the secretaries, there are total 70. The scheduled caste are 3, scheduled tribes are 3, and OBC they had not yet classified then. Of the total 70, the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, which make up approximately 23% of India's population, there are only 6 of them. In the joint secretary positions, are huge, out of 278, the scheduled caste were 24, STs were 10, OBCs were 10. And same goes with deputy secretary. These are very important positions. These are the people who sit in bureaucracy, who translate the policies to us. And then again, there is lack of representation in bureaucracy. Now, if you talk, sorry?
The deputy secretary is going to be big, relatively higher percentage.
Almost 1/3.
Yes, but again, deputy secretary is a position. It is not joint secretary. Joint secretary manages. Deputy secretary then again is a position which necessarily does not make adequate policies and has this wide reach. And this is again, that's the thing. The representation we have is a representation, not necessarily of the powerful position that needs to be handled. Now, when we talk, let's talk about Indian businesses. And this is citations. You guys can check up. It was published in EPW, paper by Varshney Khanna, a colleague, and Iyer, both the colleagues at Harvard. And they had this starting statement. They said the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are significantly underrepresented in the ownership of enterprise and the share of workforce employed by them. And this is, of course, the caste-wise distribution of Indian corporate board members. When you talk about finances, right? This is what it says. The forward caste, which is, of course, Brahmin, Vaishya, Kshatriya, others, were 92.6%. The corporate board members were 92. Then the other backward classes were 3.8. SC, ST combined 3.5. So when we talk about economic positions, we are actually, talking about what? 3.5% of the SCs and STs that we want to target, which is again heavily underrepresented. And then we talk about, enterprise ownership, which is again depressing when it comes to, owning this capital and having this wide outreach within the community. So since we have crunched the data, there is certain suggestions, how do we improve diversity and experience at IITB? I mean, of course, it's coming from Pratap, who has experienced here, who has lived here, and of course, there were the previous presentation talked about, having lived through this extremely stressful times, because you have made it, now you have to prove it. And if you could not prove it, then it gets more depressing. And so, one of the suggestions of many is improving diversity on campus, because it improves the students' experience on campus. Of course, we need diversity. We need people with diverse backgrounds. And what diversity constitutes is again a broad definition. But we need this kind of underrepresented communities as well as genders who are not part of our classrooms. I mean, one of my friends who went, I think, was in 1991, who came to IITB. He said he had 3 female in his whole course. And he said his experience here, he couldn't understand what it meant to. He was, I think, in computer science. He couldn't understand what it meant to be a student of computer science and have a perspective of gender, of women folks within his group. The most important issue is about students' wellness. We dealt about it, and I think this is a very serious issue. And this is related because, let's say, of the 10 faculties, 9 are male and 1 is female. And the absence of many female faculty creates this negative impact on the female students, because they can just go and immediately have this free conversation with male professors, and this is very evident. Similarly, this happens with, let's say, students belonging to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC, Muslims, or other minorities. The representation is not adequately present, and this is a very correlated aspect. The another issue we identified is the poor design of student experience. I mean, maybe Pratap can meditate more on that.
Yeah, see, this was a point that, discussing with Anurag Chaturvedi in particular helped on this. So one of the issues is, if you enforce representation and bring certain segments of population to the campus, that is not enough by itself. If you do not give it the right environment, then, it will atrophy, it will commit suicides, or it will quit programs halfway through. So if you don't provide it the right student experience, then those will be the outcomes that will come. So you have to give it, you have to develop a student experience. And, discussing with Anurag, basically it dawned on me that my own experience bore this out. When I was at IIT, in the first 2 years, I accumulated lots of backlogs, probably, I'm absolutely sure, more than Vikas Bhatia. But perhaps. But from the 3rd year, and my mother was so upset, and she came and spoke to Phatak, Dr. Phatak. Dr. Phatak was warden of Hostel 8, and he also happened to be my faculty advisor. And she told him, I don't understand what this guy is studying. When he was a kid, I used to teach him, and I would explain. And
and she kind of requested him to take care of me types. I don't know what he's doing, I can't guide you. And she wrote me a letter, and that kind of turned me around. And in the next 2 years, I through absolutely every way that one can clear courses in the rule book, I cleared all my remaining backlog and got out in 4 years. So that's one of the points I see there. So that suggests to me that if the students are allowed to vary the pace of the program, sometimes take less courses, sometimes take more courses, then that is something that really helps. Another example of the same thing was one of my other batchmates called Nirmal Roy, who has currently had some bad news. But he had a gap. He took a gap of some 6 months or so, and he graduated with a CPI of 7.5 plus, and he has an excellent career in Microsoft for a long number of years. So letting people have some flexibility in their program is very suitable for learning outcomes. So varying the pace of the program is a big thing. Another important thing is currently, I was talking to Anil Prabhakar, who is a prof at IITB. The process of setting up these prerequisites for courses, it is done in a very lackadaisical manner and in a very in a manner which is where there is no accountability. So if course A and course B have been identified as prerequisites for course C, and if I have cleared course A and course B with a reasonable amount of grades, and if I am failing 3 times in course C, then there is something desperately wrong with happening. Somebody needs to be held accountable for that. So we do track such kind of data. Speaking to some of the students, so the student who presented in the today afternoon, I went and spoke to him. I showed him this presentation, and he said that this data is gathered. But then, what is done with this data? Are we doing something with this data? That data should be used to hold somebody accountable, or at least revise the prerequisites. Maybe add one more prerequisite, so that the learning outcomes improve, the completion of programs improves, and the student experience improves. And the third thing is this improving student engagement for individual courses. So vary the course pace of the program. Let people have drops, and make sure the prerequisites are clearly identified, and improve the student engagement per course. That's the other thing.
Thank you, Pratap. So, what are the benefits of diversity? It is mutual. It is beneficial to all of us. It offers students quite a perspective.
Sorry. So, regarding that, for engagement of courses, it is very important that the learning and assessment experience, that is the course design. The course design is a one-size-fits-all currently. There are people with language difficulties. There are people with some specific deficiencies in maybe some elements of coursework. There is a preparatory course to address some of those elements. But I don't recall a particular course, particularly Math 3 was as terrible, perhaps more terrible for me. So if there are some specific deficiencies, then, so if some corrective actions can be taken, it can be identified, which can be done before preparing before the course. If some things could be done in that manner, if courses could be customized or course experience could be customized based on individual student needs, if something could be done on that course, and that this is a practice, this is a best practice. My wife is an academician in the UK, and she has studied this in formal literature there. We made a presentation about it to a UK university, West London University, regarding this. So there is a very systematic process of doing this, and this is best practice. Customizing the learning experience based on the academic needs of student is a best practice, and currently we have a one-size-fits-all process. So that needs to change.
We can read, of course. The idea of diversity is not merely having representation only. It is also about inclusion. It's also because it fosters us, it prepares us to really be part of this global dialogue, that rather just being following the parable of we are truly global, we are truly trying to improve. Because diversity also gives us this experience that we otherwise might not get, especially in an Indian society which is as much segregated due to class, caste, religious belongings, where we are although we shoulder ourselves in some of the public gatherings, but still we don't have adequate experiences of what an Adivasi ST student might be coming from, or a SC student might be coming from a slum, or or maybe we come from certain background and privileges that certainly other groups might not have, and this kind of cohesive interaction might help us understand how it functions. And diversity has been embraced globally, of course, across the world, especially within the Western capitalist framework, because of course the output is expected more. But in this case, what I look at diversity is actually to democratize our understanding. It is also for us to move away from the parochial ideas of dominance and hegemonic, and irrationalities. We want to actually strengthen the true ethos of democracy, and diversity talks about it in long terms. Of course, diversity should be, more importantly, should be voluntary, welcoming, and mutual. We cannot enforce diversity. It should be accepted. It should be recognized. And if it is not, then the process we are failing it. We will just start pushing off, and we will not have this cohesive dialogue happening. And then why? Because if we do not, then we also know the incidents of intimidations, workplace violence. We read a lot about the incidents of women sexual assault, and also if a woman goes in a position of power and she has to perform the whole gaze, the patriarchal male-dominant gaze is on her too. So because we have not really understood, or we have not really welcomed the concept of diversity, although we laud that we have female folks this much, as we talked about the representation, about 33% of females represent, only 33. Female in India, 48.9%. Of course, it's close to 50%, let's say, and they are only representing 33%. So the 17% of women folks, irrespective of the caste, religion, background, are not there. And this is because I think if we push them and we are not welcoming them, then we'll have all these serious issues which continues to haunt us. Why diversity? You know the reason. Just ask yourself, what makes an extraordinary person? I think because this is this diverse openness to talk, openness to listen, openness to have a dialogue is, I think, that's part of it. Diversity is about one's background, one's privilege, lack thereof, one's struggle, one's access to certain resources, not access to one's limitations, one's insecurities. This acknowledgement, will place the question of merit, quality, talent, success, hard work, mental capacity, coping strategy, exam marks, all in one place. Because we immediately declare the question of talent or hard work or the mental capacity or can you cope without adequately considering the factors of diversity that contribute to it, what kind of background one is coming from. And if we place that, we will be able to understand the conditions, and then we will be able to reframe or reframe the definitions of what we have as modern day notion of merit. And also, the reason we want to diversity, as I was saying, we want to bequeath a workable democracy. We don't want to have these few elites coming from few pockets and then determining the rest. And this is what happens from the top Ivy League schools, for example. And this has been the contention. By the way, Harvard admitted 49% of students of color this year, which was fantastic. And this is also because the few elites from few families. In Harvard, when we go admission, they ask you, are you from this family? There are like 10, 15 families named. And they really want to know. And these are very Anglo-Saxon, Protestant kind of, names, which are really. And this then again translates into the corporate governance. Of course, they are stories of outliers. But again, Malcolm Gladwell talks about they are not really outliers. They had already had the setup, like Bill Gates and all. So, diversity is also important because we want to smash the injustice. We are just not here to promote, the only idea of doing welfare or doing this patronizing help. Or, we are very careful about women folks. We are very careful about scheduled caste. No. We want to actually go beyond that. We want to actually challenge certain notions that remain unaddressed and unresolved. And one of the, to begin with, we want to start smashing with patriarchy. We want to let go with it because this has been a problem in our modern setup. We still kind of hold dear to that. Second is we want to, get away with discriminations of any sort. But there are also prejudices and an uninformed, biased condition that we always inform, based on one's birth, one's class, income. And diversity will kind of help us to diversify and also democratize our way of thinking. Maybe Pratap, you want to talk about the strategies of.
Yeah, I already talked about the first part of it, that the learning experience should be customized, and secondly, there should be once we gather the data, we can establish the correlation between student experience and student engagement, and academic outcomes. Once we have that correlation built up, we will be able to manage the experience to minimize suicides, improve student wellness, help manage the stress. Because if we don't gather data and use that data to improve the process, then why are we not doing that? Because these are things we can do. I am not aware of any evidence of doing that, and if that is not working, then certainly probably we need to gather more data. We need so maybe that process is not visible to me. It may be to some of you, but there seems to be a gap in this.
I'm sorry, I just want to.
Sure.
If you can go back to the US. So, like it has happened in the US that in some colleges there are so many whites, they include on purpose some minorities just for the benefit for the education of the whites.
Yeah.
And you don't want to also
Yeah.
fall in that trap here also.
Absolutely. So that's why we are saying, the point is, I said it should be mutual. We should create that environment. Or we can just force and we can just take the brackets that we got this, This is very patronizing. This just shows how shallow we are in our understanding. And that's what happened. That's why there is a, it doesn't show you, but there is the question of diversity and inclusion. We need to include, we need to incorporate, because without inclusion, diversity makes no sense. We just put the people of color. Lani Guiner, a Harvard law professor, talks. She said it's a cosmetic diversity. Just got this few different colors and few background. That's it. But again, it doesn't translate back into this, this very moral ethos. So, India for Diversity. I'll briefly explain what is this. I think this project is actually, we want to create space for all of us. We want all of us with our different background, different upbringing, different ideas to actually come together. Doesn't matter what background you are, what caste you are. We will value what you bring to it. Of course, your identity will be important to us. But for us, currently, we are actually misunderstanding each other more than understanding each other. It's because we have this ingrained kind of understanding of, okay, this is how a Muslim is, or this is how a Hindu is, this is how a Sikh is, this is how a woman will react, this is how a Muslim woman is. We have this kind of biased understanding because we have not talked to each other as well. The concept of, we want to initiate a dialogue. We want us to come together and start thinking, how can we collectively think about it? Because at the end of the day, the few elites who will be in the position of power have been continuing to dominate our discourses.
I just want to add something here. There has been a stone silence on diversity data in India. For the last 25 years, I tried to get visibility of this kind of data. And it appears in patchy forms in different forums, and I have gathered a good amount of it. And Siddharth has gathered a lot more through RTI, and there are a few other activists who have gathered some more such data. But such data is not easily available. That's why one of my objectives was to show this data to you. Actually, as far as I am concerned, that data speaks for itself. There is nothing else. Is this the kind of India that we want? We have spent already, so many years since independence. These dreams of independence were not this, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like 2 points that you brought up. I mean, there's the words safe space for all and the concept of, democratizing the setup. Because it's not only, when we look at this kind of data, we pick up data about the lowest segments, how many SCs, how many STs and so on. But the problem is when this kind of mindset pervades, everybody suffers. And it's, I don't want to mention names, but yeah, I've seen lack of safe space during my days in IIT. Where somebody, because he had a Mania surname, was told that he was not fit to do pure mathematics, and he goes on to win the Bhatnagar Award, which is the highest science award in the country. Okay, and so this is something that that we have to keep in mind, that it's that sometimes you can be an upper caste and you, because of the tendency to have a hierarchical society, you don't have a safe space and you undergo stress to the point of really having risk of falling into depression.
Actually, a very valid point. You made during your presentation, Vikas, you said safety. belonging. Absolutely, that so resonated so well. I am so thankful to all of you for giving this opportunity. Firstly, feeling safe about doing this. Believing in something is one thing, but being able to stand up and share it with you is a two-way thing. It is not a mere broadcast. Somebody has to be there to listen. These chairs could have been empty. You can always speak by walking out. But fortunately, there is some belonging that I'm so delighted. After 25 years at least, I feel quite nice about this whole thing.
I feel that talking about unity, diversity, and inclusiveness and all, it's very less. If you see all the social media and all, it all talks about compartmentalization, Hindu, Muslim, and all. So why is that?
See, I think
people who talk about inclusiveness are taking like pseudo-secular, this, that, and all.
See, I think that's where we have to fight, and that's why we are in this room, right? We don't want to really break this country into pieces, and this is, if we start, and this is already broken, we have ghettos, we have slums, and slums belong to disproportionate people who belong to lower class and caste, There's always a segregation existing, and if you want to voice your opinion, which is not with the status quo, it's actually falling into the trap of fascist agenda. We don't want to do that. We know what fascism has done in the World War, and we can't afford. The point is, as much as we are dedicated to ourselves, very few of us understand how the Constitution even operates. We just refer to it, and when we talk about, let's say, groups who are really marginalized, suffering untouchability, let's say scheduled caste, or the Muslims, living in under severe intimidation, under certain kind of this huge living in this quote unquote Hindu India, which is this promise. What we want to do is we want to guys. This is the thing. What we want to say, it's actually everybody. We want to we believe in the firmness of everybody as beautifully different and yet the same.
I would like to respond to that. See, the most important thing is to talk on the basis of data. When you talk on social media, the history I learned as a child is in tatters. I don't know whom to believe. There are so many versions of history floating around.
Yeah.
History is staying in tatters. Current affairs is in tatters. You just can't. You don't know what to believe these days. So the history is in tatters. Current affairs is in tatters. You don't know what to believe.
In fact, people believe WhatsApp messages more than what's printed.
Actually, they killed. There were reported incidents in India based on WhatsApp assumption. This violent kind of happening.
So it is very important that we have to have data-based discussion, and whenever you have encounter such thing, ask for data. Ask for data.
Nobody is worried about data. They just forward messages, not even bothering to check on Google whether such a thing is there or not.
Actually, right.
Yeah, actually.
I recognize three. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, actually, I want to go back to Lolita's question. We haven't even.
I will come. Okay. Can I address that question?
Sure.
Okay. Do you want to talk?
No, go ahead.
Okay. See, I appreciate your question, right? Why do we compare diversity and first of all, thing is the ranking component is not about how much people you graduate. It's about in proportion to how many people, how much population it is, And so when we are graduating people, there is this comparison. There is a demographic of many other factors. One is, are we really elevating the people who are really, who have not really had access to educational endeavors to graduate, And one of that thing that then exhibits in our outcome of research. Now, there are very few academic journals that are published from India, from education institutes, that rank in the impact factor. There are, but they don't rank in this kind of, So the academic output also, because what happens, and this is this research, right? And this is research done there's a book called Whistling Vivaldi, right? So what we do is essentially, and there was this case given that there were people who came from this private elite schools and they went to this private elite, business schools. And there was a group or other which didn't come necessarily from private elite school, but they went into this. And so what they did was, they made these two groups and they gave them this research. And they were asked to identify, they were given a problem and the solutions were asked. So the recommendation that came from both of them, one was literally, if we read, it was literally like a tyrant. It was like this dictatorial, this is not working, so we should, because these people who came from certain backgrounds didn't have the understanding of diverse social realities. So their suggestions were very much relating to how they conceived of the pain of others. It's like me as a male thinking what a female is suffering. Because it's a very distance. And when they gathered this, and this was people from diverse social and economic backgrounds, they gave suggestions that was helpful for the policy to sustain, and it kind of adequately considered the economic factors. There was this policy, these people were like, building a hotel, there was this case. And these guys were like, if you want to build a hotel, just get the international investors and all that. But these people were like, let's think about land first. Who does that land belong to? How do we negotiate? So these are the basic, and one of our friend Anil, who was mentioning, one of our friends who is head of railways in Bangalore, because he comes from this socially kind of background, there was this rail project they want to make, metro, and he told me one thing, that there is this slum, and so the proposal was, we want to build a railway, and the question was, now there is a slum, what do we do? So this guy who came from this background, he said, no, let the slum be there, people are there. So he's trying to actually go underneath, bring, let's not dislocate these people. So what does it mean is, this is the kind of background this background you come from, you project into the society, or else, as I was saying, we may not be able to smoothen our efforts to that. I had 3 hands, if you guys want to, yeah.
We don't have no question we had put up, that also not answered yet.
Which one?
You talked about the data that you presented was specifically about social divisions.
Right.
We talked about another division called economic division.
Right.
And that's across all strata.
Absolutely.
So would your data reflect even that?
Yeah. Now let me tell you, schedule caste.
To basically tackle this perspective, that economic stratification is equally or probably much more, maybe that's a perception or maybe reality, maybe fact, but you need data to either justify or disapprove
I
that
agree with you.
That your data should have that axis, that matrix.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we should add that dimension.
It specifically talks about whether economic strata does impact or doesn't impact.
See, I showed you the corporate board. Hold on. I showed you the corporate board data, right? Yeah.
In that concept, whatever the data you have shown for the SC/ST population and representation in the government sector job, that is for the representation on the basis of the government policy. That doesn't have any interaction with the economic policy. That is only socially, those people are outcast. They are not the representation in the service sector or education sector. That data it has been given. As far as economic ground, there is no reservation in the representation in the country. So we should not, there should not be linkage between.
So how do we talk about?
But the point is valid that data should be there. Whether we use the data to justify X or Y is different. Data should be there.
For anything that is relevant.
See,
if his point is relevant, then it should be made available.
No, his point is that the data will not be available in the first place. You can ask for it, you can file an RTI, but you won't get the data because there is no strategy, that is not taken into account.
We should have a mechanism to get that data.
See, what we are trying to do is, with that mining 3%, we are still trying to mine how much of them. What we are trying to do is, we are trying to screw.
So it's a 3%, it's a 70%. Everything should be taught on the basis of data.
I understand.
And the data should have 0% ambiguity.
The point is, what you are saying is this utopian kind of dream where we want to really demarcate this idea, Now, when I show you about the corporate representation, can we apply the same to women? The same, because women suffer from social disabilities.
So this data is...
Then if she is coming from, let's say, a background where she is economically rich, but socially she is not acceptable. She is still a woman.
Yes.
She is still surviving. So where do we draw a line there?
For those conclusions, this data is good enough.
That's exactly, that's what we're talking about, social disabilities.
Guys, Suraj will be here, we can continue the discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
You know what? We're going to stop here, but I'm going to answer the question I asked you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Singapore the last 4 days before I came here. I was at NUS and NTU, I was invited by them. And I learned the history of Singapore in about 5 minutes. And the thing I learned was that Singapore was forcibly split from Malaysia because they wanted to be more just somewhat more, not homogeneous but fair in many ways, very democratic. When they started out, the Malays were at a very different level, socially, economically, educationally, than others. And the way the President or the Prime Minister dealt with this was really extra additional help. Today, the society actually has a far more balanced. I mean, there's different populations, but they really did. I think I'm sort of agreeing with all the things you put in there, but it helped me think back about it, that extra help, and that's what he was talking about, right? And this is something we have to think about as educators, whether here or in the US or anywhere else, that maybe we should be teaching these students or helping people to their abilities to get them to the next level, right? And I think that's
It's not God, that's the whole problem.
What?
It's not God. The biggest problem is that
I think we have to close it up. I'm really sorry.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
But thank you. Thank you very much.
Guys.